All right. Katie, Hoff, and Todd Anderson, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Thanks.
Good.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, where are you guys coming from?
We are coming to you from Royal Oak, Michigan, which is, I feel like the best swimming people can hear it's like 40 minutes outside of Ann Arbor.
Nice. Now, Todd, I feel like that's kind of where you grew up in that area, but Katie, how did you end up there?
This guy. It's funny, actually, because I went to back when they were called Grand Prix, but I used to go to Ann Arbor Grand Prix all the time, like back in 2006, 2007. So I only really knew of Michigan because of that meet, and I only really knew of Michigan and not Michigan State, which I stand corrected. But his whole family's from here. We got married here, so we've been living here for about 2 years now.
I went to Michigan State, so Ann Arbor is like hell on earth for us. So we avoid that at all costs.
I was going to say that. So we got an Olympic swimmer and a former NFL football player. So you're married now. You've got a business together. Where did it start? Where did you guys meet?
So we met. So he was training for his pro day down in Naples, Florida, and I was training down in Naples, Florida with T2 prior to 2012, and we just had a similar. Actually, I was going to the same trainer because I was seeking out more core and stability work while I was training for trials, and we just met that way, and then actually ended up just staying in contact because he went back to Michigan State and became friends, and the rest is history. But
we stayed in touch. I had no intentions of pursuing it. I had like a month off before rookie camp. And I was like, we're hanging out, come visit, and kind of like a blind offer. And then she actually did. So,
well, I didn't make the team in 2012, as we know. So I was like, anywhere, I don't want to be anywhere but home. It'd be so fun to go to Michigan. And you're cutting over. Going into 2012 trials, he was like, well, can I have like a USA Swimming shirt, so I can cheer you on and rep you? And I'm looking I can order anything from Speedo at the time, but XXL is not your standard size for swimmer. So I had to go above and beyond to find an XXL shirt for him.
That's a good in though. Give me a shirt, and I'll come watch you. Smart. I like that.
For sure.
I was looking through just Wikipedia real quick a second ago, Katie. I didn't realize we went to the same Olympics in 2004, hey?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I was a baby.
I know I'm old, but I didn't think you were that old.
04. I know. It's funny. We have more connections than you think. I was going to tell you, Auburn, when I was 12 and 13, was I had an Auburn cap I wore every single day. I was destined to go swim at Auburn. I was obsessed. So we've got more things in common than we even knew.
Absolutely. Well, it's interesting you say that because you ended up ultimately not going to college at all, right? Didn't you forfeit college?
I went pro after 2005 World Championships. And so decided to forego. Now I could do both, but I went pro with Speedo and signed with Octagon, and the rest was history.
That's interesting. I'd like to talk about that in a second. Todd, I'll jump onto you real quick in terms of your college choice. Why did you end up choosing Michigan State?
So I actually walked on to Michigan State. So, that was my dream come true pretty much. I didn't have any offers. I didn't have Division II offers. I somehow got the opportunity to walk on, and I was kind of like, I'm going to regret it if I don't. Definitely the hardest thing I've ever done, but run out of the tunnel my senior year as a starter was well worth all the pain and suffering for sure.
How does someone who walks on to a college team, and I'm there's thousands of positions in a college team, but there's only limited spots on an NFL team. So how does a walk-on in college get to the NFL then?
Yeah, well, not easily. I'll tell you that much. It definitely helps being in it. In life in general, I think when you throw yourself into a mix of people, you tend to adapt and elevate yourself to that group in whatever case. So I think being in a big school, and we had a lot of good teams. We won a couple of Big Ten championships. I think, when I first got there, I was so out of place and out of my league. And by the time I left, I was one of the better guys on the team. And I think, you adapt. And, I think being in a big school at Michigan State, NFL teams had a great relationship with our coaches, and that gives you a leg up for sure. There's a lot of guys that smaller schools that are really good players that don't even get an opportunity. So, yeah, kind of the right place, right time, and being in a Big Ten school and having some good seasons and good players around us, it kind of fell into place.
Isn't it interesting? I'm just thinking you two sitting here together reached the top of wherever you could go in the sport, and yet you came at it from totally different situations. Like Katie, you were so good that you forfeited college. That's how damn good you were. It was like, I'm too good for that, which is amazing. And then here you are, Todd, like not good enough, like begging to be on a team, and then you end up in the same spot.
It's kind of like our relationship. I'm just fighting every day, trying to survive, you know.
She's the talent everywhere, is she?
Yeah. No, I mean, it is. We actually talk about that all the time of just how different our experiences were, but also how similar our mentalities were and are. And I think that's what drew both of us together when we met each other, is just, you know, he had an understanding of what I was going through, and I had an understanding more than probably most people in his life what he was going through. And so I think being able to have just that instant understanding, it's just an unsaid thing, and it becomes so comfortable. And I actually really appreciated having someone come from outside just the swimming bubble. And I hadn't really, I mean, I'd never even really like talked to a football player before that. Like I knew a handful of people outside of the sport. And so that was really refreshing. And, you know, when I didn't make the team in 2012, he was one of the few people who actually knew what to say. And the thing to say is not just like, hey, it's okay, like brush it off. He truly got it. And that was kind of the start of our relationship, of just this understanding and having that connection right out of the gate.
Yeah, it's actually interesting, this whole kind of nature versus nurture type thing of like, are you made an Olympic athlete or an NFL player, or do you or are you born one type thing? You know what I mean? And you two are kind of prime examples of coming at it from different directions in that sense of like, you know, there's obviously a clear talent with you, Katie, that it wasn't enough at 15 just to have talent. Like you had to have something else beyond that to ultimately get on the podium at the Olympics and have this amazing career that you had, right? It wasn't just talent that got you there. And then Todd, it's the same thing for you in terms of like there may have been some sort of lack of talent or perceived talent, but ultimately you got to where you wanted to go. So you both ended up in the same spot. And this is where it comes down to kind of the mental capabilities of what you can go through and what you can endure and how far you can push yourself and those sorts of things. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest, consistency between the two is both of us sought or tried to be around the best talent and the most talented people that we, are around or competing with. I think if I didn't go to Michigan State, I probably went to a Division III school and been a pretty good player there, but been nowhere near as good as I would have, because I went to Michigan State. And I said, Kate, you would stay the same if you stayed in the same swim team your entire life.
Yeah.
I would doubt you'd elevate yourself to that level.
Well, yeah, I mean, you walk on the full deck at NBAC and it's like a wall full of Olympians. Like that's just like what you do at NBAC, So I think I am we talk about this all the time of raising kids. We don't have kids yet, but like how do you create that, how do you create the best environment for excellence? And I totally agree. I think it's just surrounding yourself with people where you're not the best, right? You're constantly striving for, the expectations are there. And so it just elevates you automatically to that level.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just having this side conversation with David Marsh. Him and I had kind of a small hand in helping Cody Simpson go from kind of this pop star to on the Australian team within 2 years. And him and I having this side conversation, and he was trying to kind of understand of like, how did it happen so quickly? Like even the people in there amongst it were like, how did this happen in 2 years? And I just kind of going through my memories and thinking to myself, well, he put himself with the best coaches, with the best teammates, in the best situations, with the best dietitians and the best strength trainers. And, when you put yourself in an environment like that, it's almost impossible not to rise to the level like you're talking about. Like you just pick yourself up every day because the people around you are so good that it's almost they demand that from you. Now, and all you've then got to have is kind of the discipline to say, well, I'm going to get out of bed every day. I'm going to make sacrifices like any normal athlete. And then, and that's how you ultimately get there on a fast track, I'd imagine.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think you can fake that. I think that, I think that it's also hard because I think that a lot of times you don't really know you're putting yourself in that situation when you're doing it. You might either think you're at that level, and it's going to be tough. You might kind of just, a lot of people don't have the resources to necessarily pick and choose exactly everywhere they go. So I think there has to be some luck involved as far as where you end up or what your resources are, because on the flip side, it is crazy when you see someone with limited resources make the most of it and just come out of nowhere and kind of shock the world, which happens.
Yeah, Lydia Jacoby is like a prime example that comes to mind. But yeah, I think I was fortunate, and I think those things really early on just taught me. I think there's some level of environment and some level of just learning. Like I'd look around and that was just what I saw needed to happen, and so I was just willing to put myself in really uncomfortable situations. And that's the piece where I always am like, is that something that, like, you have the environment is set up and not everyone rises to the occasion, right? Like there's some people that look at that and they're like, well, that's just that person, or that's just Michael Phelps doing that, when I know you looked at the best people at the Rams in Michigan State and you're like, well, that could be me. And I did the same thing. I was like, well, why can't that be me? Like, let me try. So I think there's a split, and it's a constant, like I could have this conversation for like 5 hours because I'm constantly thinking about it for like, how do you raise kids and that environment. I know it sounds like we're having kids tomorrow. We're not, but like, I do think.
Oh, wow. Reveal. Okay. Congratulations.
Yeah. My mom's going to be pumped.
She's going to like be crying. But no, it is something I find so fascinating of everyone has that different background, but what's the biggest commonality? And that has to be it. It has to be.
Yeah, I do too. I find it fascinating as well. And I'm glad we're having this conversation. And it kind of relates to your business. You guys have a business called Synergy Dryland right now. And so how did that come about? How did you guys decide to do this?
I'll tell the beginning part, and then he can tell the kind of the current day part. I mean, so in the middle of the pandemic, or right when the pandemic started and pools started shutting down, my agent at the time wanted to come up with a concept which essentially was providing free programming for everyone who was just sitting at home. And something that I think it's great to, and I love giving motivational motivational speeches and talking to kids. But in that moment, all I could think was, what would I want if I was still competing and I was going for Tokyo? I was, trying to compete at NCAAs. And it wouldn't be just someone to tell me, hey, just be positive, keep it up. I wanted to give them something tangible, like, okay, like we can work out together, we can get stronger. And so I just started doing, basically live Zoom workouts twice a week for an hour. And I joined in. Like I literally would just kick my own butt. Like I could barely speak on the Zoom. And the response, there was like thousands of kids that were jumping on. And the response was just so big. And we started getting more questions about strength training. And then kids got back in the pool. That continued, and they started to see basically the fruits of their labor that they had put in, during the 10, 12-week span.
Right.
And so that kind of moved into individuals, that moved into then, teams. And we were like, wow, there's really a need for this in the sport. And he has a really long background in strength and conditioning. I obviously had the lens of being an Olympian and knowing what worked, what didn't. And so we kind of combined forces to create what became Synergy.
I think that when Katie was finishing her career, when she kind of was coming back from it, I was training her, and I had to learn, I did so much research and swimming and all this stuff. And, it seemed like there was an opportunity just in a couple things. Like one, the reason it's called Synergy is just, strength coaches have a ton, swimming coaches have a ton on their plate, right? They're great at coaching swimming. Right. In every other sport, the strength coach is dedicated for that sport, and they're designing all the programs. They're very like custom and individualized for that sport. It seemed like a lot of these club coaches and even some of these big teams were almost expected to be an expert in swimming and dryland, which is just, it's just unheard of in any other sport. So, that was a big opportunity. Like, how can we take that off their plate? And then the other thing was just innovation and bringing in some of these different ideologies and systems from, different strength conditioning worlds, fitness. Those things are evolving so quickly. And, swimming, you're kind of in your tunnel a little bit, in your lane. And I think that there's some innovation that can happen and some great ideas that maybe haven't necessarily been pulled into the sport that, we thought could make a difference.
Yeah, that's really cool. I like that. I mean, it's so true that, even as a college coach, I relied heavily on, the strength coach at the university had supplied for me, and us trying to get on the same page and figure out, well, what am I doing in the pool and what are you doing on the dry land? How can we meet in the middle? But there's just not a lot of coaches who have a full understanding of the swimming side of it. They come at it from the strength side of it, but then you have to kind of give them this whole dossier on what we do in swimming and why we do it and why do we swim 2 hours and all that sort of stuff and how does it relate to the gym. So there's not enough of it in that sense. Swim Angelfish. Swim Angelfish is an online certification program that strengthens your teaching curriculum to serve swimmers of all abilities. Swim Angelfish will prepare you and your instructors with the skills to teach swimmers with autism, physical disabilities, anxiety, sensory and motor conditions, and more. Learn to teach skills faster and with more comfort with Swim Angelfish. Apply for an Only Alpha Pool Product Scholarship and receive up to 50% off your certification. Go to swimangelfish.com today to apply. How did it turn then into kind of like a full-blown business, decision to say, all right, let's take this and is it within just America, or is it a global thing yet? Like, do you have clients, because it is online? Do you have clients worldwide, or is it just America?
Yeah, so I mean, well, I'd say we've had inquiries actually from Australia. We do have some clients in Canada for sure. In terms of teams, we're just in the US right now. But I think the way that it started forming into a business was, again, I always hear this story when people talk about being an entrepreneur and building a business, and they're like, it just happened. Like, it just made sense. And that's really how it came for us. It's like, there's a need. People are reaching out. We're able to provide that. We're able to do it very dynamically with kind of the two of our skill sets together. And so once we had that interest, we went kind of dove head first into it, and have just started. We signed a partnership with Tier, which was really, really exciting and cool, and it's just kind of snowballed from there. And I think the really neat thing and exciting thing for me is it's been so much referral based, of just people really enjoying what we've provided, seeing value in the pool, whether it being having no injuries that year or getting more explosive. And so from there, we've been able to really reach more and more people as we've gone, and really fun for me to kind of get back into the sport in a totally different way than I ever imagined.
Yeah. Todd, I was going to say, Todd, is there like, were you in this industry already before this business, kind of like, getting your certifications and that type of thing?
Yeah. So I've been in the strength conditioning field for 10 years now. And, so I originally started, and I went back and worked at the facility that I trained for Pro Day. So we trained a lot of athletes there, and then transitioned into some more one-on-one stuff. And then I worked with Equinox at our corporate headquarters for a while. I worked with them in Miami, Chicago, and New York City, and we managed big groups of trainers. But through that, I was able to, I basically sought every single certification I could possibly get. I would go to, and you don't. When you chip away over 10 years, that's a lot of education that adds up. So it's a pretty easy transition. And I was always, obviously, training her. I learned a lot, and I was always interested in the sport. And I always talk about some of the challenges swimmers have, and I think some of the things they could pull from different sports like baseball and some of the overhead athletes in other sports, and they have a little bit more resources sometimes on the strength conditioning side. And so it kind of just came to fruition, and as we got more, I mean, it was so organic with the people that were reaching out, and it was also so fulfilling. Like, it was awesome.
Cool.
It's still super cool. We work with teams and seeing like big changes and people, making cuts for different big meets and getting on different podiums. It's very fulfilling and fun. So, it's so organic. Like, we don't hold anyone to a contract. It's all month to month base where we're confident we're going to give you value. So, like, we're not going to hold you hostage in, legal documents or anything like that. It's just fun. And it's been great. And, I think that kind of takes care of itself when you have that mentality.
So how do the teams do, or teams or individuals, do you guys just have a calendar and they just book in times and you guys are just in the gym all day?
No, so we usually work through the coaching staff. So we have a couple of different routes, so we do have an app where we'll provide teams if they're separate. If they don't have a facility, we can get the team and provide the team programming through our app, so they all have the resource to go through it themselves. So I'm on there. Katie's doing the workout. Basically, like they click on it and it shows a tutorial video of how to do each exercise and walk them through it. But then with the higher level teams, a lot of times they'll have an assistant coach or someone that's part-time that will facilitate the workout, but we'll just work with them like remotely and talk about the strategy and kind of walk them through the workout, prepare them for the workout so they can take the team through it.
Okay, nice. I like it. I've had a bunch of swimmer strength coaches on my podcast recently. I had Dan Daly, Dennis Hekmati, and Keenan Robinson, who's Katie, I'm sure you know very well. Keenan's USA Swimming. So a lot of good stuff coming out. So I had some follow-up questions. I'm going to hit you guys with a couple that kind of people have reached out to me and said, well, I really want to know more about this. I want to hear about that. So first one here, I'm going to just get straight into this. So we talk about core strength a lot, and a lot of swimmers and swim coaches don't fully understand what core stability, core strength really means. So what does it mean, to talk about core strength and connection?
Yeah, well, I'll let you go first from the swimming one.
I mean, I feel like within my experience, I mean, to me, when someone talks about good body position, to me, it all stems from the core. I felt like I was able to stay right on top of the water, really be able to engage on breaststroke and butterfly for the more short axis strokes. And so to me, like he's the more science person, so he's going to be able to answer on that level. But, from an Olympic athlete perspective, I felt like my core was everything. And I didn't necessarily feel like that meant I had to do sit there and do 400, 500 crunches a day. Like I felt like everything that I was doing, whether it was a goblet squat, or a squat jump or whatever that may be, I always felt like my core was a part of that. And I was constantly working my core. So, and then when I got in the water, being able to immediately activate and engage that for what I was doing, that's to me where it really comes into play. But
let me ask you about that. How do you engage your core? Because a lot of people think about core, core is like flexing, just turning on like your six pack type of thing. But it's not that in swimming, is it?
No, I mean, I think I always compare it to, I felt like, when I would get in the pool and say, I'm working on breath timing, or I'm working on, a high elbow catch on freestyle, I would be focusing on the drills and I'd be exaggerating it and doing it in the drill. I don't ever feel like, and maybe this was just the way that I operated and I swam, but by the time I was getting into doing repeats all out and workout or getting into the meet, I wasn't sitting there being like, oh, I need to have my elbow up at this position, right? Just happening. And so I felt like when I was doing core movements, on land, and I would do it before a session, and I would come to the pool, I instantly felt like my body just was able to remember how to activate. Again, I wasn't thinking of squeezing my core, when I was on top of the water, I was, activating it. I just felt like because I had that strength, because of what I was doing on land, it instantly connected. And the same thing of anything I was doing overhead in terms of, my lats being able to grab more water, whatever that may be. That's how again, I'm sure there's some science behind that, but for me, that was where I felt the most value in terms of that, land connection.
And I think from a programming perspective, I think we kind of look at it as a twofold approach. For us, the core is, okay, can you resist movement through the spine, right? Can you keep a pillar position, torso, at one. And then the other thing that I think is often overlooked is, when you look at the core and just the attachment sites of the muscles, it's a very broad area. And the core alone can produce very little force, right? If you sit there and try to twist it again, you're not going to produce a ton of force. So it's how do we transfer force the most efficiently as possible? I think that's kind of what Katie's talking about is, our limbs, our legs and our pecs and all these big movers on our limbs produce a ton of energy and force. And it's the more efficient you can transfer that through your core, the more it's going to eventually, extend out to your extremities, your hands, especially your upper body extremities, and translate into faster swimming. And that's what we're trying to do. Transfer force is the main thing we're training. And as opposed to, some of the slower twitch, generic, like core training movements you'll see.
Yeah. Todd, one of the things I was taught when I was learning about the core and kind of connecting it was sucking in the belly button. Is that something that's still relevant?
Yeah. I mean, it's tough because you're going to get different opinions, but when we look at an athlete in sport, the last thing you want them thinking of is how to activate their core, right? Mm-hmm. We want them to go. And that's true with anything. When you think about deadlifts, squatting, when someone's in a sport, there's no way they're actually going to have that thought process, and that's going to actually slow them down. So right. Something like sucking in the belly button, oftentimes when we're doing a heavy strength movement, we're actually going to do the opposite. We're going to create space, fill our torso with air to create the most spinal stability that we can. In, the belly button will expand. So I wouldn't say that there's no value in that, but for the most part, that's not something that we usually teach.
Right, I gotcha. What about coordination with the core? I know it's different as you're growing up and your body's changing, and you're getting taller, and you're trying to figure out what your arms and legs are supposed to do in the pool. It's like it becomes it's really difficult to kind of get a teenager to kind of engage with the core. They don't really know what's going on there. How do you guys deal with that?
I think that I think relating things to real life scenarios that are already happening is a very powerful thing. So I would say we always encourage kids, one, to play multiple sports up into a certain level. Yeah. The other thing is, I think it's really important in how you speak about an exercise. There's tons of power in language and analogies. And, there's Nick Winkelman, who has a PhD in motor learning. He does some amazing things, and just the way that you speak about a specific movement, and especially use an analogy related to a real life movement or a real life scenario. For example, like jumping, relating that to a rocket leaving Earth or shooting through the atmosphere. It's amazing the language you use, how much that affects the actual efficiency and how quickly their coordination and they catch on to that movement happens. So we try to use language in some of the videos that are easily digested that kids will hopefully relate to. But at the end of the day, variability and doing different things is pretty amazing for the brain. So you'll see as the younger we get, the more variability in programming there is, just because like that neurological development and, like you're saying, proprioception and their limbs and all these changing levers on their body. That's kind of how we try to incorporate and combat like the quickly changing body of a young swimmer.
Right. Katie, I got something for you. One of the biggest kind of wake-up calls to me was when I was traveling with the Australian team, went to Japan once, and just watching the Japanese swimmers in their pre-meet kind of warm-up. They would sit there for about 45 minutes going through a series of kind of, exercises, core connection, just body awareness type stuff, stretching. But it was so inclusive and so in depth. And then they'd go in and do their water work and then come back, put their suit on and race. And I was just blown away by how much they prepared before getting into the pool. Like us as kind of Australian swimmers, American swimmers, we kind of just stand there and then coach says, all right, let's warm up, and we dive in the pool. It was like, and my frustration with the college team was that every day is like, can you guys do something before you get into the water so that we're prepared to get the warm-up going? So you know what I mean here. So how important do you think is that education of teaching the athletes to have a pre-warm-up routine?
Oh my God, so important. I mean, it's so funny. I look back, like that was something that I was doing at MBAC starting at 13, 14 years old. I mean, that was like the expectation was you're getting to practice, at least 30 minutes early. And part of that, I think, is part of it's physical and part of it's mental. Like it's giving you an opportunity to, like, the second I start doing my foam rolling, I start doing some of these activations, like that's focus time. I'm locked here for workout. So that's partly what it did for me, of just being able to, I would go in, I had my routine, I'd look at the workout, I knew what I was needing to execute on that day, and then I would go into that routine. And so number one, I always felt like I was very primed. And then I could also bring that to the meet, because then I had that same routine that I was very much, rooted in for confidence. And then at the same time, it was just mentally being able to feel prepared, and ready to go. Right. So I am a very, anyone I talk to, when I talk about routine, when I talk about, really going what is that extra step? What is that extra 1% that you see all the elite athletes doing? I would say even more so now, probably a lot less back then. But that's what it is. It's not just, standing around and jumping in and then taking all of the warm up to get ready. Right. Probably, the first round of the set, get ready from the second you jump in. So you can maximize, that meet warm up or, the set that day.
And that's something we do with all of our teams is we actually collaborate with their coaches and kind of their philosophy. And they'll have like this is your team's warm up that we expect you to do before Dryland, but also before you get in the pool at any meet, just because, they can get that consistent connectivity that you're talking about.
Yeah. I'd love to see that shift in the American culture, man, where athletes turned up half an hour early and just had a routine going. Oh man, that would just so thrilling.
Catch up.
That's it. Well, you guys are setting the standard for the younger ones now, so that's awesome. Todd, Katie's an interesting case here because she's female and she swam kind of distance type events, right? And so a lot of females are afraid of getting in the gym and getting stronger, and especially the ones that swim kind of these distance events. They're like, I don't need to be strong. I do everything I need to do in the pool. I don't want to look like a man, all those kind of, preconceived notions. So how do we combat that?
Yeah. Well, I think, the first thing is why it's important to support things outside of the pool, like the nutrition. So I think having a good understanding of how that impacts things in the weight room is a good start. But the other thing is, and that's something that's very specific to swimming, is what we're trying to do is make someone basically as strong as possible while putting on the least amount of size and weight. Right. That's the goal. So, it's very difficult to put on muscle, and you can ask any guy that's tried to put on 10 pounds of muscle. It is a very difficult thing to do when you're doing all the right things. I think tapering the training down to where you're working on more of a neurological power output, not doing heavy volume and hypertrophy type workouts that are going to, break down the muscle to the point where it's going to put on size and recruit, hypertrophy of the muscle. That's the last thing we want to do. So we do design workouts that are specific to power where, we're working on like maximum velocity, relatively low reps. So we do avoid that happening. But, as far as physiology goes, it's very difficult to do, especially if you have your nutrition under control. It's honestly usually goes the opposite. Usually a female responds extremely well to strength training, body composition improves, oftentimes measurements improve and all that stuff. And at the end of the day, usually, your hydrodynamic abilities or profile improves. So you tend to go a little bit faster.
And I always felt like confidence went through the roof too, like they're like, wow, I actually feel incredible. I'm not putting on the muscle that I thought I was. I'm not a bodybuilder. I'm just strong and athletic and I feel great.
It's awesome. It's awesome to see. And that's the other thing is like some of these kids, it's like, they're not all going to swim forever, but it's cool to see things like that happen. Like, get confidence, life skills, like working out is a life skill. It's not going anywhere. So it's pretty cool to see when that transition happens.
You do need more strength and power as a sprint swimmer, as opposed to kind of the 200, 400 type athlete that Katie was. So what would be the differences you would think in coaching the two?
Yeah, I think that with the power athletes, like the shorter sprinters, you are able to hold a little bit more muscle mass just because at the end of the day, you're going to need a certain amount of actual muscle mass to produce maximum amounts of power. So if you're talking about coming out the blocks for a 50 free, you're going to need to recruit enough motor units where you're going to put on a little bit of size, and that's okay. So I think finding that balance, taking a look at body composition, and then again, I think with the distance swimmers, making sure you're really strategic with which exercises you're taking into certain rep schemes and which exercises you're keeping like a really low rep count and intention of more power training from a neurological perspective and not actual like a muscular fatigue perspective, kind of how we would tweak things. You're going to get a little bit more high reps in higher volume in the power group, and then the endurance group is going to taper off. Still high intensity, meaning like we're going to ask you to jump through the roof or whatever we're doing, but going to be a lower amount of volume, I would say, over a periodization model.
Destro Swim Towers. Gain strength in the water with a tower of power. Save $150 per double swim tower by using code BRETT, B-R-E-T-T, at checkout. DestroMachines.com. Vasa has been the go-to training tool outside of the pool for over 30 years. Vasa's products are ideal for developing power and proper technique in your swimmer's catch. Add a few Vasa trainers to your pool deck and it's like adding an extra lane to your swimming pool. Go to vasatrainer.com, use code BRETT at checkout, and get 10% off anything from Vasa. It's interesting. I had a list of questions here, and you guys were like, oh, let's just see where the conversation goes. And the conversation's just going in a different direction now. So I like that. You mentioned body composition. Katie, I wanted to bring this up with you in terms of the female athlete again. It's a very touchy subject.
Yeah.
So, like, how do you deal with body composition? And what's the best way you've found to measure it where a woman, a female athlete feels comfortable in knowing what the body composition is and getting an accurate read on it?
Yeah, you're right. It is a touchy subject, and I feel like it's really, I mean, for especially like a male coach, female athlete, that's got to be one of the hardest things to address. I mean, I think if you always steer it back to what for you is the weight, muscle mass that you are going to perform your best at, right? If that is the question and you can understand that piece, then understand that maybe you don't need that extra 500 calories a day, or maybe you don't, you can scale back on the number of times you're eating pizza. Like for me, it was more the way that I thought about it was, okay, if I can be the leanest possible, then it's going to be that much more easy to get through the water and, pull myself through the water. I like to measure my strength to weight ratio a lot through pull-ups. Like I knew if I could crank out 3 times 10 pull-ups and I could max out at 17 pull-ups, I was in a pretty good spot in terms of, where I was strength-wise to my body weight. But I was pretty conscious and pretty in tune with what my racing weight was. And I was constantly, I think, I was never in the point where I was trying to lose so much weight that I felt like I lost strength. And that was a weekly conversation. That was a weekly touch base. And I think the times where I did see my body fat increase a little bit was the times where I just, I wasn't as strong. I wasn't as dialed in, and it was a direct correlation. I can reference those times in my career. But it just has to go back to the number one goal, which is swimming fast. Yeah. And wherever that is for you, is the goal.
And I think from a coaching perspective, what we try to do is, the number one thing coming out of having a conversation like that is we want that athlete to have a positive relationship with food, right? The worst thing can happen to a female, or anybody really, but especially a female swimmer, is them, one, having a negative relationship with food because of this, or prior having a negative relationship with food. So I think that, when you dive into the goals and the psychology behind it, and, you start to get factual, understand what they want to do, where their mentality lies with certain foods, and dialing back, there's no good and bad, there's just different amounts. And, really taking an educational approach has been the best route that we've found. Extremely sensitive. And again, they have to be ready for those conversations. You can't force that upon somebody.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I appreciate you guys talking about that. We do often talk about women, but I can remember distinctly, I was a scrawny little kid who wanted to be a world-class sprinter. And you talk about, Todd, the fact that, guys generally have a lot of trouble putting muscle on. I was one of those people of like, I would try everything. I was having 4 protein shakes a day. I'm eating whole chickens. I'm like doing everything I possibly could to put weight on. And then I'd have, an uncle come up to me and be like, oh, you're scrawny. When are you going to get strong? And I'm like, damn it. So like, even as a guy, like I had some body image issues.
Yeah. On the other side, I was super fat as a kid. So I mean, I still have like certain insecurities from. I've come such a long way, but
men don't tend to talk about it as much, right?
No, you're not allowed. That's not a thing. I think changing that's going to be a big deal. I think, a lot of the mentality and the psychology of men has just been pushed aside for so long. But most guys are having the same feelings. When I was in other sports like wrestling and stuff where body image is even more physically visible, there's all sorts of feelings that are going on. And I guarantee you there's just as many younger guys out there that are having problems as females, to be honest with you. So hopefully it becomes more normal. I think it's starting to, but it's still a long path.
I mean, talk about the Speedos. I mean, swimmer guys are like the ultimate.
That's what I mean. You can't tell me. And also, how many kids aren't swimming because of that? I mean, I'm sure that has an impact.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. No, I remember at the age of 18, I'm like, I'm going into the gym this summer. I'm not coming out until I'm 10 pounds heavier, just with pure. And I just did hypertrophy training, for like 3 months, where I was just like, I'm putting on muscle. And it worked in a sense that I definitely got stronger. I don't know if it made me a better swimmer, but at that time it made me feel better about myself.
Yeah.
That goes a long way. I mean, you feel good about yourself, you're going to go pretty fast.
Yeah. Now I'm the opposite. Now I'm like, damn it, I can't get this weight off me. It changes, guys. Don't worry about it. The metabolism slows down. Let's talk about this then. What are the other differences between men and women in strength and conditioning? Do you keep them on the same program, or do you have different programs you do for men and women?
We keep on the same program because we work with teams that they train together.
Right.
If we had a team that had separate groups, we would probably do some different programming. Mm-hmm. There are differences for sure. I would say the differences, there's definitely differences in timing and all that stuff as far as cycles go. There's definite literature on that and the effects of that, but that's going to be tough. That's a really difficult thing to take on from a team perspective. But as far as overall condition, overall programming goes, I think that females have to work particularly hard. So they've done biopsies in men and women, and men with even the same amount of tissue create much more power, especially in their upper body muscle tissue. So I think for a female to develop upper body, especially extremity power, that's going to take a specific focus, and they're able to produce a little bit more power in their lower body relative to their overall mass. So it'd probably be a little bit more of the shift, some upper body specific, like power focused exercises. But in general, and then the other thing is they tend to be more hypermobile. So we do movement screens with all our athletes, and we'll get an idea of like how mobile or how stable some of their joints are. They tend to be more hypermobile. So if you were to take a whole men's team compared to a women's team, men's team's probably going to have more range of motion issues. They're probably going to have more stability issues. So be more stability focused stuff for sure.
Right. Gotcha. That makes sense. Katie, I get a lot of questions about taper specifically. When you were at your best and when you felt your best on race day at any major championship, were you doing some type of land work all the way up to, pretty close to race day? Or were you the type of person in a program where you cut it out at a particular point?
I love this question because we get this question a lot. I was doing, I remember, you actually even see, I don't know if you saw on our Instagram, but I have this picture of me, in Athens, Greece, at one of the pools. I think I was probably 3 or 4 days out, and I was I found this rock because they didn't have any med balls, and I was doing kind of chest throws, but actually not throwing the rock to get my med ball throws.
Wow.
Right before race time. So yeah, I think the biggest thing that goes, the fastest is power, right? So I always was doing some level of squat jumps, some core work, some med ball stuff, nothing that was going to break me down or make me feel fatigued, but being able to maintain the explosiveness was something that I was always doing before any of my big meets, whether it was World Championships, Olympics, and that's something that carries over to what we do with our athletes, leading into it. That to me, just stopping is not the right thing to do when it comes to actually being able to feel your best at a meet.
Yeah, it's one of my big regrets actually is I did do that. 04 was kind of the end of my career, getting close to it. And strength and conditioning back then was you work really hard for a certain period of time and then you just do nothing for 3 or 4 weeks. It was just cut everything out. And I could just feel my strength just disappear, my power, especially like you said, my power just disappearing. And being I'm a completely different person now than I was 4 weeks ago. I was strong and powerful. Now I feel insecure, a little weak. I'm trying to figure out where my power is. So I definitely shifted that as a coach. And now, in my training with a lot of my sprinters, especially Bruno Fratis, for instance, like what you said, like just doing a med ball slam, even 15 minutes before a major race, just like activation of just feeling that power and then transferring it to the pool. Absolutely, we do those things, Yeah. I like it. What else did I have here? This is a big one, obviously. So shoulder injuries. Did you ever have a shoulder injury, Katie? And what do you guys do for prevention and treatment?
So I was really lucky in the fact that, I had, small things here and there with my shoulder, whether it was maybe, we could call it tendonitis, but it was nothing that ever kept me out of the pool, really ever. And my only injury in my career was a pulmonary embolism, blood clots in my lungs. So
Wow.
I never had experience with that, but I know a lot of teammates that did. And I know there's a lot of athletes out there that constantly struggle with that. And so we actually have really specific protocols to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah. I would say our approach, we view the shoulder, the scapula is like the North Star of the shoulder, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's essentially floating there, 17 muscular attachments, right? So if something's off, you're going to see that in the rhythm between the scapula and the humerus. So we try to do an assessment with every swimmer at the high levels we work with and just see how their scapulas function in relation to your humerus. And that's usually a pretty good start. If you got some issues, you're going to see some winging, or it's not going to rotate as much as it should. And that's kind of where we start. And then from there, we dive into, okay, why is that happening? Is it soft tissue work we need to work on? Is it their T-spine rotation? Maybe it's their posture and it's not able to slide on their ribs. So I would say the biggest things we do is activation of like the serratus and all the surrounding muscles that move the scapula.
Right.
And then our secondary thing that a lot of swimmers have problems with is just the labrum. So when we're looking at the labrum, attaches to like the superior part of the glenoid and runs in the biceps. We're just making sure there's activation and any type of pulling or anytime the joint's unstable, just because that's when that's going to get tugged on and the instability of the shoulder. So I'd say the two-prong approach, scapular rhythm and mobility, and then just stability throughout the shoulder. So being able to transfer force and stabilize that joint since it is super mobile in most swimmers.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And the other thing you said there was soft tissue work, which is interesting because a lot of shoulder injuries occur kind of later in your teens, by the time you're about 14, 15, 16 is where you start to get these shoulder pains. And a lot of kids aren't doing any soft tissue work and they're just hammering themselves and then expecting their recovery to be maybe when they sleep or when they take time off from practice, in between practices, but they don't do any stretching. They don't do any soft tissue work. And then they wonder why they're getting these chronic shoulder pains. And then it's not till they get to maybe college where they get their first massage and they're like, oh, wow, why haven't I been doing this for a number of years, right?
Yeah. I think it's tough too, because you feel like a little bit indestructible when you're younger.
Yeah.
So you really understand it. But like all these, 90% of probably swimmer injuries are just overuse. So it doesn't happen overnight. That's taking years and years for these problems to develop.
Right.
It's crazy how, massage is one of the best investments consistently a swimmer can make, but there's not people that do it at that age.
I agree.
That's something I was doing. People would make. Sorry, we live near a train, so if you hear a train, but people used to kind of make fun of me, like when I was younger, and I would do a weekly massage, and it wasn't something that I looked forward to. It was the most painful thing of all time. Like but I think there's this feeling, whether you're not a non-athlete or whether you're in the sport and you're just not thinking, like you said, of massage as being so important. But obviously, if you have the resources to do it, it's one of the best things you can do. And if you don't, I think, we harp on it all the time. We program in soft tissue work, but then having people understand soft tissue work is not just like rolling around on a foam roller for 5 minutes. And that's what it turns into. It's like, it has to be very specific. You have to set time aside to do it. And you have to, really kind of make it hurt for a number of minutes. And no one wants to do that. But I think that was something that I really invested in that made a big difference and allowed me to do all the yards and really be able to be consistently performing on a daily basis.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Another thing we see that frustrated the life out of me, I go into the guys' locker room occasionally and they just have supplements like lined up in the locker room. I'm like, what is all this crap you've got in here, guys? Bottles and bottles of stuff. So in terms of supplementation, what's your thoughts on it? And especially I want to talk about creatine? Because I do get a lot of comments and questions about creatine. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, supplements in general, 99% of supplements are a scam, right?
Yeah.
There's pretty much only been a few, that have actually been proven out to increase performance. And the main two are, protein, high quality protein,
Right.
and creatine is the other one. So we generally don't recommend supplements to our athletes, right? If you can get high quality proteins from meals and whole foods, that's the best you're going to get. For example, when you talk about creatine, I mean, it used to be, the reputation it's gotten over the years is insane compared to what it actually is. When it first came out, it was like they thought it was coming in a syringe, the way that people talked about it. But and it's very naturally occurring substance, and it has a ton of positive health benefits, from cognitive with the brain and performance and all this stuff. So, we're pro in that sense. But on the flip side, if you have a large piece of beef or something like a grass-fed beef, you're going to get close to 3 grams anyways. So, I think that you can get, the same amount of creatine you would for supplementing, if you're eating a really high quality diet. Now, that being said, I think it's hard to do. I think it's something maybe as an athlete gets a little older, maybe in college, it's something to explore. I think you have to understand what you're getting yourself into. There's certain parameters around it, but for the most part, it's deemed pretty safe at this point and have some positive effects.
Right. We individualize training in the pool, so why not individualize your nutrition? Erica Beine of Beine Wellness Building will help you and your swimmers get exactly what each athlete needs through genetic testing and personalized nutrition plans. So stop guessing what you should and shouldn't be putting into your body. Athletes within a few weeks have noticed they're recovering faster because they're fueling their body with what they need and staying away from what their body hates. Erica understands swimming. She gets it. She's worked with over 20 Olympians, including the fastest man in the world, Caleb Dressel. Group discounts are available, so go to Beine Wellness Building and get in touch with Erica today. That's Beine, Beine, wellnessbuilding.net. Do you guys deal with diet and nutrition at all? Because I know it's a changing world, and there's a lot of vegans out there. There's a lot of vegetarians now. There's a lot of different diets, a lot of different ways that people are cutting out certain foods, so that, I'm sure that would affect your strength and conditioning programming and certainly the swim programming based on all these different diets. Do you guys deal with that at all?
Yeah, I think it's tough. I think we
get a lot of questions.
We get a lot of questions. We get a lot of different philosophies. I think we try to stay grounded in science. That's our main thing. And always go back to the whole foods and quality choices. But we do consult with some dietitians, which is helpful, because when you get someone that has a specific diet recommendation, or that has specific ailment or restrictions, that's when we kind of we want to make sure they're talking to an expert. But we deal with it all the time. I think that if there's anything we've learned from all this stuff, is that we don't know what's exactly at this point. There's a lot of ways people can be successful, and a lot of different ways to skin a cat in that world. So we always support whole food choices. We can help, and we can provide resources to kind of fit any needs, but it's a tough world to navigate for sure.
Yeah. Well, we stay in our lane. Let's just say that. Yeah.
We definitely dive into general recommendations surrounding practice and post-work and all this stuff.
Or favorite protein bar or stuff like that.
But all the new diets popping up, it becomes, and there's so much information out there now. People are just asking a lot of questions, and a lot of times the simple answers are the best, and that's not necessarily the answer people are looking for.
Yeah, no, I agree with that for sure. Well, listen, if anyone wanted to be around people who've been there, done that, and got expertise in strength and conditioning and dryland and swimming, you two are certainly people that I'd reach out to. So how can people find you? Synergy Dryland, where can they find you?
Yeah, so we are on Instagram, so it's just Synergy Dryland all together. We also have a website, which is very simple too, just synergydryland.com. And then if anyone wants to email us, it's just contact@synergydryland.com. And then we both have our own personal pages, which we like to do some TikToks. We upload some TikToks. We make fun of each other. We post workouts. So I'm just KT Hoff 7. And
Todd Anderson Todd Anderson 42 _.
Yes.
Yeah, Todd, listen, Katie's the star, but you got way more Instagram followers than her. So
Everyone says that. It's so annoying.
you got one up on him, man. It's all good. So
she was right before like the heavy Instagram wave. She would have had a ton of followers, but she was much better.
They're hard to grow. They're hard to get.
Me, so she gets that.
I love it. Well, listen, I appreciate this. I hope people reach out to you. I hope you get a ton more clients out of this, and you guys are awesome with what you're doing. I appreciate your time today. So thanks a lot, Todd and Katie. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
All right. You guys wait there. I want to talk to you for a sec.